My name is Elizabeth Bailey. I live in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, and I'm a food writer and local food advocate here on the South Shore. I have a day job working as the Community Health Board Coordinator for the South Shore. But one of my big passions is writing about food, cooking, and working with people who are interested in learning how to cook food from scratch and explore and support local food here in Nova Scotia. So I've always been a passionate cook. I started cooking at a very young age. My mother was an excellent cook, which I didn't fully appreciate until I went to university and found out a little bit more about what other people were used to in terms of food. But my mother cooked from scratch. Her grandparents owned a Swedish restaurant on the shores of Lake Michigan in the States, and she grew up at the restaurant and was a very, very good home cook. When I was young, we lived in Italy for a while, and my mother took cooking classes there. So I grew up with just great food in the home, and she taught me to cook. When I was in high school, my mother was working full time. She taught grade 3, and my father was also teaching, and they were both very, very busy during the school year. And they said, here's the deal. We don't want you to get a job when I was old enough to work. We are going to give you a very big allowance uh, and ask you to do the cooking and shopping and cleaning during the week. So starting at age 16, I made most of the meals for my family. Um, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed it a lot and I learned quite a bit. I also worked in a bakery after school and before I went to university. And then while I was in university, I continued to cook. I did some freelance catering on and off, and I worked in restaurants during the summers. I just always really enjoyed working with food. Eventually, I decided that I'd like to try writing a book of my own. So I went to Word on the Street in Halifax. They have a session called Pitch the Publisher, and I put together a pitch for a book about the apple industry in Nova Scotia. And I won an award for the best pitch, and a couple of the publishers wanted to talk to me after the session. And both of them said the same thing. They said, you know, you did a great job with your pitch. We're not interested in the book that you pitched, but we think you would be a great person to write a cookbook. And I said, oh, I'd love to write a cookbook. In my mind, writing something that was a bit academic was, you know, sort of what real work looked like. And writing about food and cooking food and writing recipes was just pure fun. And the idea that I could get paid to do something that was just pure fun for me was amazing. And so I ended up writing my first book with Nimbus in Halifax. That was A Taste of the Maritimes, which came out in 2013, I believe. I followed that up with the second cookbook, Maritime Fresh, in 2015. In the meantime, I started writing a recipe column for our local paper, a weekly column. I wrote for other publications such as Farmer's Almanac and Your Local out of DVL in Liverpool. And then last year, I wrote a book for a larger American publisher called The Make Ahead Sauce Solution. I think he might be my biggest fan. He's also my biggest student because he loves to cook. And right now, you know, between him and my husband and me, we sometimes fight over who gets to cook in the kitchen, and we negotiate a schedule: who gets to make brunch on Sunday, who gets to make dinner on Saturday night. And I love that. I love it that we are all enthusiastic in the kitchen. And now that he's 14, he's not just learning from me, he's experimenting with new techniques and flavors on his own. And for him, one of the best things is to be able to come up with something that I've never done, and he can serve his food to me and help expand my horizons. So we both really enjoy that a lot. Yeah, I think I'm really passionate about local food. I think what is local food depends a lot on where you live and what the climate is like there and who's growing what. One of the things that I love so much about Nova Scotia is there's a lot of great local food here. There's good growing land here. There are lots of small farmers who are eking out a living. And we also obviously have the fishing industry, which brings in great local food from the seas. Uh, I feel especially strongly about systems of food that allow food producers to earn a decent living. Um, and obviously, I support my local farmers market, but I'm even more enthusiastic about systemic ways to support local food, such as getting institutions like schools or hospitals or anybody else who does large scale food procurement to get them involved with local food. Because when institutions have contracts for food procurement, that allows farmers to plan well ahead into time so that they can plant food that they will then sell on the contract they already have, instead of trying to guess what individuals will want to buy and planting for that. It's more security for them. It helps bring the cost down for everyone, and it really helps the community to flourish, keeping the dollars in there. And then, of course, when you have local food, more people are uh, eating better, right? Local food is almost inherently more nutritious because it has a shorter time between being harvested and eating. And I happen to think it tends to be more delicious as well. I've taught classes and workshops in the past, and I really love doing it. I'm always looking for opportunities to do more. Yeah. When I love to cook with other people, and I love that relational aspect. I love to talk to people about food and hear what do they like to cook? How do they normally cook in the kitchen? What did they learn from their parents and grandparents? And what are they interested in learning, right? So whenever I work with people, I start with what do they know already? And what do they want to do to improve upon that? And then start from that place. So let's just talk a little bit about home cooking. Something that happens to me a lot when I'm out talking to people about my books and talking about cooking is people say, "Oh, you're an expert. I could never do what you do." And what I like to say is I'm a professional writer. I'm a really good writer. Not to toot my own horn too much, but that's something I've done professionally, and I know that I'm good at it, and that's what's allowed me to write books and be successful. And I am a very good cook, but I'm not a professional cook. I am an amateur cook. And the people who are my audience are other amateur cooks, right? People who work jobs during the day and come home and they're tired and want to cook for their families, but maybe have limited time and energy to do that. And so whenever I'm writing about food, I'm keeping that in mind, right? I'm not writing for people who can get 20 unique ingredients and spend an hour and a half making something fancy. I'm writing for people who've got half an hour or 45 minutes and they need to use whatever they've got on hand before somebody has to go to soccer practice or start their homework. That's what my family life is like, and that's what most people's family lives are like. Um, I'm cooking out of love for the food and love for my family. And I think cooking skills are something that anybody can improve. You start where you are and learn one or two things when you have time. And don't be perfect. Don't try to be perfect. Nobody is. Uh, if you increase the amount of cooking that you do at home by 10%, that's great. That's a win. You don't have to do it every single night. You don't have to make something that everybody loves. You don't have to cook for the whole family either. I think my next book is going to be called On Sundays I Cook for Myself. Something else I like to recommend to my readers or people who talk to me about food is I think it's a great idea for everybody to grow just a little bit of your own food. You don't need to have a big garden, or you don't even need to have a garden at all. You can have a few herbs in a pot on a windowsill, depending on your interest and your space. But having just a little bit of something that you grow yourself that you add to your food really makes it more special. That's a good question. And I can tell you that I didn't always have a healthy relationship with food. I had eating disorder when I was a teenager and really struggled with issues around control and food for a long time. Uh, and I feel that a lot of what changed that for me was growing food and getting to know my food, getting to know where my food was from. When I bought food locally, getting to know who produced that food and what it meant for them to produce that food. Of all of the things you could spend your time and money on, food is the most important. clothes, anything that you buy for your home, that's something that affects you, is around you, but food becomes you. It literally becomes who you are. And I just don't think there's any better place to put your resources.